There has been discourse online on Finnish Bookstagram about whether authors get compensated fairly enough in Finland. Hi, I'm Jenni, and in this video I will first look at how authors are compensated here in my home country, Finland, and then I will move on to talking more about publishing in a global context. So a few authors have come forward with how much they make from the books that they release. Not so much about how much they get when they sign their first contract, but then later on when the books are out and how much they get from each sale. One of them is Finnish author Pontus Purokuru, who has released 11 books. He shared on his Substack that he received €326.49 this past year in total for all of his books, and then got additional compensation from people who borrowed it from the library. So the library pays about 25 cents per loan to authors. That totaled into €865.40. And on his Substack, he mentioned that this is better than for most authors. And in that same Substack, he mentions that according to Union of Finnish Writers, a median income for Finnish authors is €3,000 in a year. So that's like maybe a month's salary in a different job. Another Finnish author, S.K. Rosted, who has released 2 books so far, she has shared that she makes about €2 to €3 per purchase on her hardback books, and she doesn't have a paperback book out. And for audio book listening, she receives from 5 cents to €1 based on how much it has been listened to. Then a Finnish author, Niko Hallikainen, who has previously released 2 books, released his 3rd book for free as a PDF file on his website. When releasing this book, he did an interview, and in that interview he said, and this is my translation, "The publishers, the booksellers, the tax collectors make more money from our books than us authors do." Now, I do not know what the initial payout for any of these authors is. However, whenever I would check different publishers' sites about, submitting your own manuscript, many of them stated that the manuscripts should be as finished as possible, meaning that publishers expect aspiring authors to do free creative work. The consensus from all of these authors, and just generally what I've seen from this discussion online, is that you cannot live only as an author in Finland right now. Of course, there are always exceptions to this rule, but for most authors, writing is their secondary job. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule. Someone who comes to mind is Sofi Oksanen, who has written and released many books, and they have been translated into several languages. And of course, if you are a successful author, making €2 to €3 per purchase could amount to a great compensation. It's similar with streaming in a way. If you are an artist who gets millions and millions, even billions of streams, of course those cents that you get from each stream, they mount up to better compensation. But that's not the reality for many artists and also for many authors. That's a little bit about the Finnish context of this conversation that has been going on widely online. Before I move on to the global context, I do want to mention Sudan. The war, the famine, the starvation, the genocide that has been happening in Sudan has been devastating to follow, and things have gotten worse and worse as RSF has attacked civilians more and more. I will provide some links in my description to where you can donate to help even a little bit. And yeah, all of my love and support goes to the Sudanese people. I hope this senseless violence ends soon. So as you know, there are a few of these authors that are really, really popular worldwide and thus make millions and millions on their book deals, such as, Emily Henry, R.F. Kuang. Most recently, Jennifer Saint, whose books I love and whose work has been translated into many languages, shared that she moved to a different publishing company and made a 6-figure deal for 2 books. Obviously, that is amazing for those individuals. But again, those are for few individuals, not for all authors everywhere. As for Emily Henry, obviously, her books have been phenomenally popular and she has gotten movie deals for, I think, each of them. So there is a stark difference between, someone like her or an author who writes as a hobby along their daily job, maybe several jobs. Also, being from a wealthy background helps with a lot as well. I mentioned earlier that, at least in Finland, publishers expect ready, nearly finished manuscripts, which means free, unpaid work. But if you are from a wealthy background, that's no problem. You can happily focus on writing. Someone that comes to mind from this example is R.F. Kuang. She's a very talented writer. I loved Babel and Yellowface, but especially in Yellowface, she kind of ignored the theme of class and how much class impacts publishing as well. She is fortunate enough to come from a wealthy background and has been able to focus just on her writing, which is incredible, and not to mention her incredible higher educational background. So of course there's always a possibility that you become an author whose only job is to write. But these examples I shared, they are very, very rare and are becoming rarer and rarer these days. And in a way, these authors that are guaranteed to sell help smaller authors in that way that the publishing companies then can allocate money to books that may not be million sellers, because they can count on those other million sellers for profit. But all in all, just few authors being able to make a living out of writing does not help all authors as a collective. Speaking of profit, because publishing companies are of course after profit, they want to make sure that every penny that they invest comes back double, triple, quadruple. They tend to then publish only books that are guaranteed to sell well, books that will go viral on TikTok. Which again is very similar to how music labels work with artists, that they only invest in artists that they know will go viral, for example. And this kind of leads to publishing companies usually publishing just one type of book, one type of author, and usually those are the ones that are in the mainstream. And then publishing authors tend to not want to invest in books by marginalized authors. In their mind, they think that why would they want to invest into a book that may not create a viral TikTok moment, but might find loyal readers, when they could make a quick buck on a book that will go viral on TikTok, guaranteed. There is this danger of publishing, while it has become more diverse, it's not nowhere near diverse enough. And it is because publishers want to publish books, of course, that make them profit, but then they usually end up being kind of the same book over and over again. Not to mention, books are really expensive these days. So if you as a reader want to support new authors, it's a financial investment that you really have to think about. At least I do. In Finland, the VAT for books is 14%, which is extremely high. The current government raised it to 14%. So new books are usually like around 35 euros. A working person who lives paycheck to paycheck, who barely has enough money to put in the savings, they can't just, buy a book that's 35 euros or more. Yes, of course, there are libraries, but if you are interested in a new book, usually a lot of other people are, and then you have to wait for it for a really long time to get your copy from the library. Obviously, this is not an issue for everyone, but for some people it is. And yeah, as a reader, you want to support authors and make sure that they get the money that they deserve, but when in reality they really don't, because the amount of money they get per purchase is not much, whilst also new books are really expensive. So unfortunately, I don't really have a solution to how can we help authors get compensated fairly when the publishing industry has made sure that the authors themselves are the ones that make the least amount of money in the process of releasing books. Sure, I do hope that everyone who is a reader wants to support new authors and marginalized authors, but when books are expensive, that is very difficult as well. So what are your thoughts? Do you think authors get compensated well enough? Is it fair that some authors make millions while others can barely scrape by with their releases? Why is publishing industry the way it is? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.